Hello folks and welcome back to another Halloween edition of Movie Recommendations. Today we're going to be looking at the Night of the Demons trilogy. So let's dig in by starting with the first in the series, 1988's Night of the Demons. It's Halloween night, and Angela, the creepy goth girl from school, is throwing a party at the notorious Hull House, a deserted funeral home that has a dark history. The party gets off to a fun start with sex, drinks, music, and dancing. However, the party has only just begun, as Angela decides to conduct a seance with her friends, and ultimately conjures up an evil force that starts to take possession of them all, one by one. The party is not about fun and games anymore, it's about survival. Night of the Demons is a fun supernatural horror comedy from the 80s that is obviously not meant to be taken too seriously. The cast is actually full of unknowns, with the exception of Linnea Quigley, who you may know as the scream queen of the 80s and early 90s. However, the characters for the most part are fun to watch. Everyone is clearly having fun making this film. The main villainess, Angela, is very memorable. Her gothic look and bizarre nature really make her stand out. And when she becomes a demon, she has some very memorable lines of dialogue. Some people have compared her personality and sense of humour to Freddy Krueger, and it's not hard to see why, as the influence is definitely there. You also have the characters of Stooge and Sal, who are the comic relief, and most of the time they are hilarious. Sal's character is actually the most surprising because he is actually the character that changes the most. He starts off as an egotistical dick, then changes when he gets to Hull House and realizes there's something wrong. And by the end of it, he's trying to help his friends survive. And another character I like is Roger, who is probably the smartest character in the film, as he is the first guy who tries to leave before the problems start to get bigger. The other characters are either unmemorable or complete assholes. Oh, I forgot to mention, our heroine of this movie is a character named Judy. I thought she was okay as a character, but her dialogue and performance is really hammy. I guess it fits the tone of the movie, but to me she just looks clearly inexperienced as an actress. The film was directed by Kevin S. Tenney, the director of the semi-cult classic Witchboard, and he, along with his cinematographer and art director, gives the film a good atmosphere. It has a smoky gothic look with lots of pale blues, greys, and lots of dimly lit dark hallways, which are coupled with some Evil Dead-like camera work. The music by Dennis Michael Tenney is effective. The opening credits theme with the creepy animation is a real standout. And the song in the end credits, The Beast Inside, is also really cool, even with the thin production. The special effects in the movie are done by Steve Johnson, who has done some very impressive work on this film. The makeup for the demons is very effective and the gore is nasty. Probably the most memorable effect involves Linnea Quigley with a tube of lipstick. The movie was a box office success, costing about $1 million to make and grossing over $3 million at the US box office, and made even more money on home video. A respectable sum for an independent, low-budget horror film. While Night of the Demons has some pacing issues and some characters and performances that are very weak, it is still a fun 80s B horror film that I do recommend. Overall, I'd give it 3.5 out of 5. It's a lot of fun. And a full 6 years later, Night of the Demons 2 came out in 1994. Why it took so long is anyone's guess. I would have thought they would have made this sequel right after the first one. But such is not the case. The plot this time involves students at a local high school deciding to check out the legend of Hull House and the horrors that had happened before. And of course, horror ensues when Angela returns to wreak havoc. If Night of the Demons 1 was a horror comedy, then Night of the Demons 2 is a comedy horror. This time the horror is secondary. However, I must confess, I like this movie just a little bit more than the original. To me, this movie is like Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2 syndrome. Both are good, but are clearly different in tone. However, the characters this time around are not quite as memorable as the first film, but Amelia Kincaid, who plays Angela, is awesome. In fact, even more so in this sequel, because she is practically the star. I also like the character of Sister Gloria, who plays a nun. She has a good sense of humour and ultimately helps the students to try and take down Angela. And one of the funniest characters has to be the punk known as Z-Boy. He's just so fucked up that he's priceless. The other characters are serviceable for the tone of the film, but don't really stand out as anything special. The movie looks as if it got a bigger budget than the first, but it only cost $1.4 million to make. And it still looks and feels like a movie made in the late 80s, even though it's made in the mid-90s. But the practical special effects are incredible, quite possibly the best in the series. Steve Johnson has outdone himself on this film, and that's probably where most of the budget went to. The director this time around is not Kevin S. Tenney from the first film, but Brian Trenchard Smith, who was an excellent choice because he keeps the look and feel that Kevin Tenney used, but amplifies the humour and the wackiness of it all, which has always been Brian Trenchard Smith's trademark. If I have any problems with the film, the supporting characters aren't as memorable, the music isn't good, and I was hoping that they'd keep the style of the original film with the synthesizer score, as well as the opening credits animation style, but for some reason they just seemed to drop it, which is a shame because it helped build the ambience. However, the movie is never boring, has great effects, a decent plot, the good characters are very enjoyable to watch, and the sense of humour is perfect for the film's tone. This movie is the definition of fun horror. Overall, I give Night of the Demons 2 4 stars out of 5. And finally, in 1997 came Night of the Demons 3, aka Demon House in some territories. To be honest, in my opinion, there's not much to say about Night of the Demons 3. It's just very routine, and to be honest, it's rather unimaginative. The plot this time around involves a group of teens taking refuge at Hull House after committing armed robbery, only to find out that the demon queen Angela has returned. The idea sounds promising at first, and the film actually does pretty well for the first half hour, but then it sinks into mediocrity. The characters are unlikable, the special effects are just awful, and I think that's in part to the fact that Steve Johnson is not the effects guy on this sequel. But there's also some really cheap CGI effects used in the movie, and as we all know, in the mid to late 90s, everyone was abusing CGI, and this movie is no exception. There's also a change in tone on this film. The first two films were mostly just gory, fun popcorn flicks, but this movie, I think, tried to take itself way too seriously in the first half hour, and then it tries to add some of that humour, and it does it so poorly that it comes off as stupid and tired. Oddly enough, this movie had the biggest budget of the whole series. It cost over $7 million to make, but yet it looks so bad, and I think that's because they spent most of the budget on CGI. And like the previous film, this movie has a different director, Jimmy Kaufman. Although Kevin S. Tenney, the director of the first film, wrote the script for Night of the Demons 3, and later went on to say that it was a great idea on paper, but probably not so good on film. I think it's pretty obvious that this is my least favourite of the series. However, it's not unwatchable, as there are some positives. For one, Amelia Kincaid once again does an excellent job as Angela. She may well be one of the most underrated horror villains in the whole genre. There is plenty of nudity, the opening credits are reminiscent of the first film, and the movie retains a good visual atmosphere, but overall this is easily the weakest of the sequels, and it's no surprise that it went straight to video. Overall, I give this one 2 out of 5. Now before I wrap up this review, I have to quickly address the remake of Night of the Demons that came out in 2009, and to be blunt, it just sucked. It tried to be more serious and failed due to poor performances. Shannon Elizabeth as Angela is no Amelia Kincaid. I don't buy her as a mysterious and creepy goth girl. She just seems to be playing dress up for the Halloween season, and her attitude is like a drunken prom queen. So, she sucked. But also seeing Edward Furlong in this movie was very painful. Good lord, Eddie, what happened to you? You were in movies like Terminator 2, American History X, and Detroit Rock City, and now you star in crap like this. But then again, Edward Furlong's track record has just gotten progressively worse since those movies. It's really sad. The effects in this movie are also laughable. The demon makeup looks really silly. They look like cheap Halloween masks lathered in Vaseline, and some of them don't even look like demons at all. They look more like zombies. And the movie's feeble attempts to add humour just undermines the film even more because it's set out to be serious. This was a dreadful movie and I would steer clear of it at all costs. I give the 2009 remake of Night of the Demons a flat 0 out of 5, the lowest I think I've ever given to a movie. Well, that's my review of the Night of the Demons series, folks. I hope you all enjoyed it, and have a safe and happy Halloween.